So now let's look at inheritance patterns on sex chromosomes. Before we get into this, we have to talk about what sex chromosomes are. So sex chromosomes are one pair of chromosomes in the genome. So here is a human karyotype, just an arrangement of all the chromosomes in a human cell. One of those pairs, right, these are all homologous pairs of chromosomes. One of them, right here, are the pair of sex chromosomes, and they contain the sex-determining genes. The big thing with sex chromosomes is that they are heteromorphic. So you have an X and a Y, and they are structurally different. They're different sizes, they carry different genes. They're heteromorphic. Now they act like homologous chromosomes during meiosis, and they also contain a bunch of genes that are unrelated to sex determination. Both the X chromosome and the Y chromosome in humans do other things. We call these genes sex-linked genes. Those are genes on either sex chromosome, either the X or the Y. And again, I apologize for the noise outside. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's something happening outside that's rather loud. So my apologies if that's disruptive. Now, human sex determination is complicated. And we're actually going to get into this in more detail down the road a little bit when we talk about human genetics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to oversimplify this right here, just talking about the chromosomes, with the caveat, with the significant caveat that it is not this simple. So just keep that in mind. I'm oversimplifying this to keep the discussion focused on the chromosomes. So for today, we're just going to do this based on chromosomes and say that males are XY, and that's called heterogametic because their gametes can be in two different forms. Half of the sperm are going to get an X, half are going to get a Y. They're different from each other, so they're heterogametic. And the Y chromosome contains the genes for male development. Now, females having two X chromosomes, that's called homogametic. That's because all of the eggs have the same sex chromosome. They're all going to get an X chromosome. So the female phenotype is due to the absence of the Y chromosome during development. Again, it's more complicated than that because there's a whole bunch of other dependencies in there. There's signaling and there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. But for today, just talking about chromosomes, it's XY and XX. Now, this is not universal. Right? Our system is different from everybody else. And this is a figure that you don't need to know. This is actually from the old textbook that we used to use, but I like this kind of way of looking at it, so I want to keep it in here. But this is just to show that there are different systems. So like for mammals have the XY system, where females are homogametic and males are heterogametic. Birds use the ZW system, where it's opposite. Females are heterogametic, males are homogametic. Many insects use what we talked about with fruit flies, where it's the XO system. It's how many X chromosomes do you have. And then other insects like bees and little like ants use what's called the haplodiploid system, where it's diploid is female, haploid is male, and so you can control the sex ratio via selective fertilization. You don't need to know all this stuff right now. This is just showing you that our system that we're talking about today is not universal. Now, an important kind of component of this are X-linked genes. The X chromosome is actually pretty big. It has a lot of genes, and many of those genes are actually like really important, but they just happen to be on the X chromosome. They're unrelated to sex determination. They're called X-linked traits. Now, X-linked traits have a unique inheritance pattern because males get one and females get two. So let's look at the inheritance of sex chromosomes. If you have two individuals that mate, right, you have female XX and a male XY. Well, the gametes from the female, they're all going to contain an X chromosome, but the males can contain an X or a Y, right? They're heterogametic. So if you do this cross, you can see how you get different numbers of X chromosomes in different offspring, right? The females, half the offspring, are going to get two X chromosomes, and half the offspring are going to get one X chromosome plus a Y chromosome. And there's your 50-50 sex ratio. At least it's your expected ratio. It's actually not 50-50, but whatever. Now, in males with that single X chromosome, every allele is expressed. Doesn't matter if the specific allele that males have for an X-linked trait is dominant or recessive. They're what's called hemizygous, which means just having one allele for a gene. And think hemi like hemisphere, it means half. So instead of being homozygous or heterozygous, Males are hemizygous for X-linked genes. And that means if they have a recessive allele, it's going to be expressed because there isn't a second copy to cover it up, right? If you get the recessive allele for an X-linked trait as a male, there's no other copy of the X chromosome that might have the dominant allele. So you're always going to express the recessive trait. An example of this is red-green color blindness. This is the most common form of color blindness, and it is a recessive trait. It's also X-linked. So a female for this trait can have one of three genotypes. She can be homozygous dominant. By the way, the notation here is N for capital N for normal vision, or lowercase n for red-green color deficiency. So a female can be homozygous dominant, having two alleles for normal vision, heterozygous, which means she'll have normal vision but will carry red-green color blindness, and then homozygous recessive, having two alleles for red-green color blindness and will be affected by that trait. Males, on the other hand, only have two options. A male can be hemizygous dominant and have normal vision, or hemizygous recessive and have color blindness. In each case, whatever allele you have, that's the trait you express because you don't have a corresponding allele on the Y chromosome because, again, this is an X-linked trait. So let's look at a cross between a carrier female and an unaffected male. So a female that's heterozygous for this trait and a male that has the normal color perception allele. Now the gametes that each individual can make, well, the female is capable of generating an X with the normal allele and an X with the recessive allele, and a male can obviously have gametes with the Y or the X with the normal allele. Now what offspring can we get here? We're going to use the multiplication rule. Okay, so let's go through this. The probability of a male is 0.5, right? Because it's 50-50 between X and Y here. The probability of a colorblind male, therefore, is 0.25 because it's 0.5 over here multiplied by 0.5 from the mom. 0.5 times 0.5 gives you 0.25. Now let's look at the probability of having a female. Here we have the X chromosome from the male, so that's going to generate female offspring. It's 50-50. But the probability of a colorblind female is 0 because even if that daughter was to get the recessive allele, it would be covered up by the dominant color vision allele from dad. So there's no combination here where you get a colorblind daughter. And this dynamic, the fact that this trait is X-linked, is why the vast majority of people with red-green colorblindness are male. Another example is hemophilia. This is an X-linked recessive trait, just like colorblindness, so I want you to take a few minutes and work this out. A father with hemophilia has a daughter with hemophilia. How could that work? I want you to pause for a minute and actually work through this, just like we did for colorblindness, and see if you could figure out how this would work. How would a father with hemophilia have a daughter with hemophilia? There are two options for how this would happen. So pause. I'm going to pretend you paused. Okay, you paused, you worked it out, you came back. So what are the two options? The most common option for this to happen would be the mother is a carrier for hemophilia. So the mom doesn't know she carries the trait because it's recessive, but she's able to pass on an X chromosome with the hemophilia allele. Dad then passes on his X chromosome with the hemophilia allele, and that can result in a daughter that is homozygous recessive. The other option is the mom also happens to have hemophilia, and then every X chromosome in the pool, 2 from mom or 1 in dad, all carry the allele for hemophilia. So there's two ways to make that work. In real life, the most common way that would happen would be for the mom to be a carrier. There's another interesting dynamic here with X linkage called X inactivation. Basically, the genes on X chromosomes are expressed in females and males, but females have 2 copies of all of those genes, whereas males only have 1 copy. Do females make double the proteins from X-linked genes? Generally not, no. You have some what's called dosage limits. You don't want to have too much of a specific protein or gene product. So females need to have a way to limit the dosage for X-linked genes. They do this via Barr bodies. Bar bodies are structures that form when one of the two X chromosomes in a cell is inactivated during development. And this is generally random. Which X chromosome gets inactivated, the one from mom or the one from dad, is random. So you end up with this very dense structure of DNA and protein that ends up being pushed off to the side of the nuclear envelope so it's out of the way. You still have all that whole chromosome, all the DNA, everything is still there, but it's just pushed aside. The result of this is that in different cells, different alleles from the X chromosomes can be expressed if you're heterozygous for an X-linked trait as a female. The formation of bar bodies involves modification of the DNA and the histone proteins that are packaging it up in the chromatin and chromosomes. A lot of this is going to be like methylation, which, if you've heard the word epigenetics, methylation is one of the major mechanisms of that type of regulation, and we'll talk about that down the road. Now again, the big thing here is that this inactivation is random, so different cells are going to have one or the other X chromosome inactivated, and this can actually have implications for the expression of X-linked traits. So for example, we can look at a tortoiseshell cat. Some genes for fur color are X-linked, and you could have a heterozygous female, and that results in a mosaic expression pattern. So for example, you could have the allele for black and the allele for orange. Now black is dominant over orange, and in the zygote, right, this individual might be heterozygous. So you got one allele for black, one allele for orange, and these two letters represent not just the alleles, but also the X chromosome. So you have one X chromosome that carries the allele for black, the other X chromosome carries the allele for orange. Well, during embryonic development, one of those X chromosomes is going to be inactivated in each cell, but that inactivation is random. Some are going to inactivate the orange allele and only express black. Some are going to inactivate the black allele and only express orange. As a result, you end up with a cat that looks like this, with a random pattern of orange and black fur distributed across their body. That's due to X inactivation. So to summarize sex chromosomes, traits on sex chromosomes have a unique inheritance pattern. This is due to two main things. One, hemizygosity in the heterogametic sex, and two, random X inactivation in the homogametic sex.